Yeah, I was like the weird kid with weird stories, but now I'm the weird adult with weird stories and it works. Everyone's so different that I think there's part of it where it's like people are like, that is crazy. What? And like that's the laughter. But I think there is also like everyone can relate to some kind of childhood trauma or some kind of like family drama. Like everyone's family is dysfunctional in one way or another. So I think it's partially relating and partially maybe just laughing at that the wild stuff I am saying. I think part of stand-up is like being able to graciously say the hard things and not like just hit people over the head with like, you know, fuck you, I'm going to say retarded. It's like, well, let's like ease into nice language and stuff, you know.
You've heard the analogy of comedy is the cheese that you wrap around the pill. And at first it's like Velveeta singles or like Kraft singles, and you know it does the trick. But the better you get, now it's in like a nice brie or like a smoked Gouda. Like,
I like this podcast. You're giving me good ideas.
You can't laugh at that.
It's Monday.
My neighbors
it's a
are
party.
listening.
Good. We'll tell them hello. Because they are on You Can't Laugh at That, the podcast where we take topics you can't laugh at and we find ways to laugh at them in the never-ending quest to prove that anything can be funny. Like Steve. Steve, you're funny. What do you attribute that to?
Can be funny.
You're right. Can be.
What was your question?
How are you?
I'm doing well.
Are you thriving?
I'm thriving.
Good. That's what we like to hear. And then we'll break down your pain because I noticed that little quiver in your voice.
I'm a small gold town in the West. I'm thriving.
I sense big things in your future, Steve.
That is a coincidence that I'm talking about San Francisco. That wasn't intentional.
That's good. Somebody's microwaving.
They're allowed to do that.
Yeah. This is Anything Goes. And today we have...
Hey, you know, he's mad at you for microwaving.
Can't you turn it on vibrate? Nobody who's listening to this is going to know. I mean, let's be honest. We're going to cut most of that.
The microwave, the lazy person's oven.
That's how they marketed it. And today we have on the podcast Hannah Boone. She is a New York City-based comedian who has performed in festivals all over the country. She is headlined at Caroline's on Broadway. She has her own podcast out now. It's called Disorders, where they talk about disorders. It's pretty self-explanatory. What's going on, Hannah?
Hey, what's up? Oh, the podcast is Disordered.
Did I say disorders?
Yeah, but I mean, I get why you would say that. It's a very similar word.
And I even wrote down disordered.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, we'll just show a picture of my notes. There's just words like all over this page. Just
wow,
there's no
look at that.
I don't stick to the lines.
Yeah, check that out. That's crazy. That looks like the chalkboard in that Matt Damon movie. What was that called? Good Will Hunting.
Good Will Hunting. That's what I feel like anytime I write on a chalkboard or in my notebook. I'm like, I'm going to come up with something really, really deep.
Yeah, you're like, I'm a janitor, but I'm a genius.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I tell myself every morning when I wake up. And
I'm a smart janitor.
Yeah, I've yet to manifest either of those things, but we have manifested a podcast. So
beautiful.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a podcast on being a janitor yet, but there's definitely
entry
one on
level position.
Yeah. That's just a step in the right direction.
It's where you start. If you want to be a physicist, you got to start a janitor.
That's true. That's a genuine career path. My college counselor actually recommended that. So
he recommended janitor and you kind of just assumed you were like, oh, you want me to be a physicist?
Yeah. And I was like, but I don't even like math.
I'm going to design mops.
Yeah. What is the best angle for mopping? All right, Hannah, we're done talking about mopping for now. I don't know. Maybe there will be a callback later. I have no promises. But who is Hannah Boone? What got you into comedy? What brought you to where you are right now?
Oh, man. I mean, I've wanted to be a comic since I was like 6 years old. I don't know if I was watching Comedy Central, but I saw Tom Papa on stage. He like opens for Jerry Seinfeld. And I was like, whoa, I want to do that. Like he was just standing there and everyone was laughing. And I was like, it kind of sounds like a nightmare the way I'm describing it, but it was cool. It was awesome. And made me want to do it. And I tried going to community college because with my grades, I was not getting into a college. And then like a few months in, I was like, nah. And then I went and tried stand up and I loved it. And it was very on and off relationship for a long time, starting when I was 17. And then I got really serious about it when I was like 24 and I moved to New York.
Okay, like non-committal, like anybody from the ages of 17 to 24 is about everything.
Like, I don't fucking know what I want to do. Like I thought I was serious about it, but like I was not. I didn't know what being serious about anything was, you know? And I was doing a lot of drugs. So I was just like doing stuff. I was doing stand-up in between the drugs, kind of.
Never at the same time?
I think no, not really. Because I just like wasn't able, I knew I wouldn't be able to. Like I would get so fucked up. Like I'm sober now, but like I would get so fucked up that I was like, there's no way that I could possibly remember words to say to people when I'm like this. Yeah, no.
Did you ever write when you were high?
A little bit. I've written after I've smoked weed before, and like it's always that thing of like, oh, this is great. This is gonna be great. Everyone's gonna love this. And then I look at it the next day and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I feel attacked.
Yeah, I just don't know. Yeah, I have no idea what I wrote.
I used to record myself. Like I would come home from a night at the bars and then I would get home and I'd pack a bowl and I'd smoke a bowl. And then I'd just be like, all right, here's some hard truths, future David. You're going to love this stuff. It's going to change the world. Like I'm talking about democracy and like socialism and, you know, the societal construct. And then I turn it on and it's just me not completing any sentences.
Yeah,
for a half hour.
You're like, I'm going to be the Hemingway of the comedy world. And it's like, you're not. You're definitely not.
Right. It's just 30 minutes about a dude on a boat by himself. So we talked a little bit about it before we started recording, but what's going on in your life right now? What's funny to you right now about the world and your day to day?
Oh God. Well, I'm like, as a stand-up, I'm trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do with myself at night. Like it's such a strange, like I'm used to doing nothing during the day, whatever. But like at night, I've been actually like asking. I actually had a guest on my podcast, and I was very nervous to have him. I'm a very, very big fan, and I got very nervous. And I meant to say like, as a stand-up, what are you doing with your nights? Like, what does it look like? And I just said, what do you do at night? And he was like, what? And then it was really bad. But I don't know. I mean, what's funny right now is hard to say. It feels like a very serious time. I'm trying to write some stand-up and I'm working on a pilot and stuff. But it's been such a serious, I think what'll happen for me is like, this is such a time of serious self-reflection and going inward that like, it's gonna be very funny. Like when I'm out of it, you know what I mean? Like a little bit later, it's gonna be like super funny. But right now I'm just like, I don't know. Like, you know, it's just so intense.
Is that typically where you find your favorite, your best stuff?
Absolutely. I think that taking like the monsters we're scared of, like in us, and turning it around and being able to laugh at those is empowering and so much fun. And I like, and especially to laugh at things like that with a group of people. Like sometimes I'll say something maybe a little off kilter, we'll say, but like, or something very dark on stage. And I feel like sometimes people will laugh at it and kind of realize like, oh, a bunch of people have this experience. We're all laughing at this, you know, or it bombs and it's horrific for everyone. But for the most part, people are laughing together, which is nice.
What do you do when something like that bombs? Like, you know that there's a lot of truth there and you know that there's humor there. Like, what's your next move?
I try to riff my way out of it. I try to comment on the fact that none of us laughed at it. And I'm like, you know, and comment on the fact that maybe it's just me and that's why we didn't all laugh at it. And then I'll try to riff my way out and then move into some lighter material. But This is great.
Yeah, we're just acting like it's not happening. It's
I just looked up and was like, oh, a cat's asshole. It's perfect.
It's a sphinxter.
Yeah, it's a sphinx. A sphinxter. Sphincter.
all that work and she just jumped down.
Man. But yeah, like I'll try to riff my way out of it and move to lighter material. Sometimes you can't, there is no going back, but
Yeah.
for the most part, you can try to kind of finagle your way out.
Do you put a lot of value in like addressing the elephant in the room when things aren't working?
Very much. And I feel like I almost do it to a fault. Like I had a recording recently for Sirius and I should have just done my set because it was a recording, but the audience was super tight. And I just kept commenting on how tight they were and like kept doing it. And then I started getting like mad and like, I didn't lose my shit, but I was just like poking more fun at them. And then I heard the recording back and I was doing fine. So it sounds like I'm just badgering an audience for no reason. Like it'll be in my head sometimes that I'm doing really badly, you know? But yeah, I do think it's important if you're bombing, maybe not at a recording, but like if you're not recording and it's just a live show, like I do think it's important to address it for sure.
It's a fine line too, because like you said, sometimes it's in your own head. You know, I've gotten on stage and been like, that set crushed. And then I'll listen back to it and I'm like, oh, that was actually kind of tepid. And vice versa. Like, why aren't you guys laughing? They have been laughing. Like I worked with a headliner a couple of weeks ago and I was surprised because he got off stage. He had like 5 or 6 applause breaks in his 45 minutes. Like he had a great set. Mm-hmm. And I talked to him after the show and he was like, do you think they like me? They didn't feel like they were laughing that much. And I was like, dude, you destroyed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's totally a thing, especially we're so hard on ourselves. Like I constantly am like, that was a bomb. I bombed. And it's like, I rarely like straight up bomb anymore. It happens, but not as much as it. And it's funny because in the beginning, you're so delusional because you like have to be. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it goes from like thinking you're doing way better than you are. And then at some point it flips and you start to feel like you're doing way worse than you really are. Like it's interesting.
I think we all focus, like if you have a really good, or not like a really good, you have a good set, but you know, it's like 5, 10 or more minutes and you could have things that just didn't work. And then a lot of things that just like kill. And then, but we all get off stage at a certain, like maybe like 5 years after doing it for 5 years or so, like we just think we did awful because just 3 of those jokes fell flat or something, you know?
I did a set on Saturday night, believe it or not, in like 25-degree weather. And I had a great set, but my opening riff, one of them didn't do well. And that's all I can think of. And I keep thinking about it and cringing. And it's not even like a joke I can work on. It was like a random riff. It's just like, I'm just like beating myself up about it.
Yeah.
How long after a bomb, how long does it take you to find the funny in the bomb itself? Or do you even look for it? Or do you just move on?
That's interesting. If it's like a crazy bomb, I'm like, I have to turn this into a story and talk about this. And I can find the funny pretty quickly. If I bomb, it usually just hurts and I feel better about it once I perform again and do well. Mm-hmm. And I probably won't feel better until that happens. And then sometimes I do, like I'll go on stage and like I'll say a joke that maybe bombed and I'll try it again and it'll do well. And I definitely will be like, oh my God, thank God you guys laughed. The last crowd did not laugh. And then we can like that's fun and very cathartic too.
Right. Do you apply that mentality to life bombs?
Oh boy. Bombs. Well, I run and tell a joke about a real life bomb as fast as I fucking can because it makes me feel better, you know? I think that's why we talk about dating so much because dating's so scary and horrible. And so we have to like turn it into something funny.
Right. It's, to me, what laughing at my own life bombs does is it really kind of opens up a new perspective of myself. Like, oh, I'm the bad guy here kind of thing. You know, I don't know. I don't know if you find yourself doing that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, writing about things is so, I mean, like, you know, you listen, but I write so much about my crazy childhood and like all this stuff. Like I write about darker stuff because like, first of all, it makes me feel better to be able to laugh at it. And second of all, it's that thing of like, people can come to like, people aren't just laughing at the stories from my childhood because they're like wild and different. They are, but they're also like relating to their own families and like, oh, my mom is kind of like this too, or like whatever, I think, or they're just being like, that's fucking crazy. And maybe they're just laughing. But like, there's something that's so healing too about laughing at something that made you really upset, you know?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's stepping out of the situation just a little bit. If you can just kind of crack the door just a little bit to see on the other side, like that's what laughing, to me, at least in my experience and kind of based on what you're saying, that kind of does.
Absolutely. Even writing things out. Like I journal every morning and it's just journaling.
Yeah.
Like that I don't look for, but I read back at those and like sometimes I can find funny stuff in them. And sometimes it's just like, it feels good to be like, here's what happened and here's how I felt. I don't know why that helps, but it does.
It's weird.
Yeah.
It's weird. Yeah. If something bad happens, that's immediately what I do. And naturally. And then in a lot of cases, instead of writing it out, because I can't write as fast as my brain moves, when I'll record myself.
Okay, Dave, got a fast brain.
He's a janitor.
I go from
smart as shit.
I go from totally unrelated points, you know, and it's hard to like trace myself back to where I was if I lose myself. So I record myself. So it's the same thing. Hearing myself say the stuff out loud. It's like, oh, that's how I realized like, oh no, I'm the asshole here. Like, because normally what I'm doing is I'm, you know, talking about something somebody else did. And then listening back to it, it's like, oh no, David, you were wrong.
That's great that you do that. You're like cleaning house. You're like, I just use like an AA term, but like, yeah, you're doing like, that's like step 4. So you're ahead of the game.
I never started doing that until I started doing comedy though. It's just that kind of free associating and allowing your brain that creative freedom to kind of maneuver without constraint has been helpful. But also it's been a little bit of not a detriment, but if I'm in a conversation with somebody and I feel like they're not vibing with it, I'm just like, oh, that's totally my fault. Like I'll immediately go to, no, this is on me. And it's like, no, it's not. I'm just, I had a bad day or whatever today. So
yeah, well, especially in comedy, we're all so weird and like socially awkward. There's so many times where I've been like, I must be like, I'll have so many conversations where I'm like, what was wrong with me? Why was I being so awkward? And then it's like, oh, that person's weird. Like that person was being weird and it made me feel awkward. Like not always. Sometimes I am being awkward, but like, you know, like it helps me the other way sometimes where I can relax and be like, oh, I didn't do anything. That person was stoned or is weird or whatever.
Yeah. I totally subscribe to that too, by the way. You know what I always say? It takes 2 to awkward.
Yeah.
You can't, I mean, yeah, you might feel awkward sometimes, but like it's definitely like a 2-way sort of a thing. It's never universal per se.
No, yeah, I like learned that lesson like last year. Like I am late in the game for that one, but yeah, no, that's great. I love that.
Isn't it a sigh of relief? You're like, oh, yes. It's not me. It's not, you know.
Definitely.
Yeah, and that helps with the anxiety for sure. So we kind of skipped past it, but you had a great segue into what we're talking about today, which is kind of our childhood conditioning and unlearning it, or in some cases, some people lean into it and double down. So we'll kind of take our childhood experiences and kind of look at them from multiple angles. And I want to start with yours because I watched a few of your sets, and this was the one from Chicago. It's the one where you have to do the hot sauce or whatever.
Oh, yes. They made us drink hot sauce. Oh, God.
Yeah.
I'm such a whore for the industry. I'm like, sure, I'll drink hot sauce.
Like super hot, like that kind of thing? Or?
It was like, yeah. It was like there were different levels of spicy, and the audience chose which one you drank. And yeah.
So you were in Chicago, obviously. I don't know. You can kind of set up the clip if you remember it. If not, we can just go right into it.
Yeah, no, I was in Chicago for this show, and it was a great lineup. Jeffrey Asmus, I don't know if you guys know him, but he was on it.
Oh, yeah, he's great.
He's wonderful. And basically, like, if you drank the least spicy one, you could have 1 more minute on your set, and there were 4, so it's up to like the spiciest one where you could have 4 additional minutes on your set, but you would drink the hot sauce and then you had to finish your set, and it was like really hard to talk because it was so spicy. And that's all I remember about the show. My dad was there.
Okay.
That was interesting because so many of my jokes are about him, but yeah.
All right. Ooh, that gives me new topics for questions. Okay, perfect. Jeremy, let's listen to Hannah Boone on Spitfire Comedy.
I grew up in sort of a kooky way. My parents met in a mental hospital, which is good because I think when people meet in bars, it's like super trashy, you know? They met as patients, by the way. I feel like I have to say that because I told a guy my parents met in a mental hospital and he went, oh, doctors. Which like, yeah, like what has not happened to you in your life that you're that optimistic? Also, why would that be how I tell you my parents are doctors? What a tricky way to talk. My parents do get pretty delusional. Sometimes they see things that aren't there, hear voices that aren't real, cool stuff like that. It's like interesting being raised by people like that as a gullible child. Because I believed in like Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy and like the men on my porch trying to kill my dad. You know what I mean? Like I have friends who are raised very, very religious and they're not now. And it's like their favorite thing to be like, oh, if I grew up Catholic, I had to unlearn all that bullshit. It's like, all right, well, I had to unlearn that my mom could read my thoughts. So, your God doesn't scare me, you know. My mom did switch religions a lot while I was growing up, of course. Like, we started off Jewish, and then when I was about 6, my mom was like, I don't want to be Jewish anymore. And I was like, oh, totally, it's like just my identity, no big deal. And then, like, whatever. And then she was Wiccan, which at age 6 I thought was super cool. I was like, oh, she's going to be a witch, she's going to be like cauldrons and broomsticks. But it's not like that. Wicca's also just another boring religion. She just like had a bunch of rocks that like meant different things, and she would like give me rocks and be like, this rock brings good luck, and this rock attracts love. And I'm like, I'm 6, the only person whose love I care about is yours. Do I need a rock? Like, oh, get a rock. That's fine. That's not gonna do that. And then she went from Wiccan to Catholic, which is like going from Halloween to jail. Okay. Sure.
That's a good joke.
And after that, she was Greek Orthodox for a while, which I still don't understand because Greek is not a religion. When people say they're Greek Orthodox, it just sounds like they're saying, we are so Greek. Yeah, we're very Greek. That's fun. The cops got called a lot to my house because it was super chaotic, you know? My parents are very mentally ill, so you want to call in the ultimate healers, the police. And my dad, no, I'm joking. She was like, oh no! My dad did go to jail for a while. I remember him trying to parent me from prison when I was a teenager. Like, we'd be on the phone, he'd be like, Hannah, you're grounded. I'd be like, well, you're grounded. Federally, sort of. If you want to win an argument with somebody, just make sure the other person is currently in jail.
I love that bit.
Thank you.
I've watched it like 4 times, so I'm like, I know it's coming next, but that Wiccan to Catholic joke is so so structurally sound, but it's so funny.
Thank you. I actually forgot about that joke. I'm glad I watched that.
Yeah. This is what we get when we play back old stuff for comics. They're like, oh shit. Either that was awful to watch, or, you know, oh man, I forgot about that bit.
Yep.
So kind of take us through the construction of that bit, if you can remember, like how it started, how, you know, you kind of found the funny in such a formative part of your life.
Well, I remember I never wrote about my family. And then in 2015, I started dating this guy, and he was like, you have got to talk about your family on stage. And I remember being like, what? because I was still like kind of hurt from it. So I never thought like of it as funny. And then I started writing about it and the jokes kind of just started coming out of my head. And like, I was like, oh, this is funny. My parents met in a mental hospital. Like, are you kidding me? And then I just kept writing about it. And then actually laughing about it was super fun. And it actually ended up being the material that did the best at shows. And I remember my parents started coming to shows and I was like, I'm not going to take this shit out. Like, it's true and it's funny. Like, I'm going to keep it in. It does the best of all my material for sure.
Do you attribute that to being like the realist of, I mean, what kind of stuff were you doing before? Or like,
what was I? I don't even know what the fuck I was like. I don't know. Who know, like sex and like stuff I still talk about, but like, I guess that was like fully like what like stuff I know, you know, this guy on the street did this thing, you know, like that kind of stuff, probably more so. And it never occurred to me to talk about like what's in my soul, you know, like it just never occurred to me to talk about that shit. So.
Yeah, I feel like there's just a day in every comic's life cycle where they just flip that switch.
Absolutely. Well, I know it's taboo to quote him now, but it's a good quote. Louis C.K. Talked about, I know, horrible. Please censor me. He talked about how like as a comic you start talking when you're new, you talk about what you see, and then you talk about what you feel, and then after like 10 more years you start to talk about what you fear, and like you just go deeper and deeper in. And I think that's very true. I think like at first all you can do is be like, have you ever noticed that cereal's like this? Like, what else are you gonna do? You know? And then you start to realize like, oh, I can mold sort of like the scariest parts of my brain into something funny, because we all have the scariest parts of our brains. Like no one, you know, I think it's scary to put that part of yourself on view for an audience. But then when the audience catches it and is like, oh no, I have that dark part too, then they kind of catch you, and it's a fun little dance.
Is that how you like take it when an audience laughs at that stuff? Like you've made a connection, or you know?
Yeah, I think it's layered. I mean, everyone's so different that I think there's part of it where it's like people are like, that is crazy. What? And like that's the laughter. But I think there is also like everyone can relate to some kind of childhood trauma or some kind of like, you know, family drama. Like everyone's family is dysfunctional in one way or another. So I think it's partially relating and partially maybe just laughing at that the wild stuff I am saying.
Yeah. In addition, I mean, we have a lot of comics that listen to this podcast, but there are a lot of people who aren't comedians who are kind of interested in, you know, how you can laugh at things like this. So we go into the bit and break down things like word choice and how that can accentuate something or get you thinking about something else. And, you know, your set, first of all, I mean, it has a great rhythm. So there's just a flow to it that people, you know, catch the wave and ride it to the end of the chunk. God, I hate that I said that out loud.
No, I loved it. Thank you.
Catch the wave, man. But, you know, you open the bit using the word like, oh, I grew up in a kind of kooky way. So the thing with the word like kooky, it's like, it's a silly word. So it almost like it lessens the darkness or like the trauma or whatever that bit may bring out of, you know, some people in the audience. Just by opening it up. Is that a conscious word choice?
Yeah. It also, now that you're talking, you realize it makes it seem like I'm going to talk about something silly. Yeah. And then it just makes it that much more of a shock when I do talk about what I'm going to talk about, you know, which makes more of a laugh. But it also, because I used to come out and just say my parents met in a mental hospital and everyone would go silent. Like it's a dramatic sentence. So you kind of have to fluff it. So I fluffed it with, you know, I grew up in sort of a kooky way. My parents met in a mental hospital, and then joke, like, which is good because I think when people meet in a bar, it's super trashy. So I had to like kind of cuddle that sentence with like silly and funny.
Ooh, cuddle that sentence. That's way better than ride the wave.
I like them both.
Yeah. They live in the same lexicon. I wrote that down. So, and then you reiterate that they met as patients.
Yes.
Which, at first, until you deliver that punchline, it's like, why is she telling us this? And then it's such a good, what has not happened to you? So did that really happen? That
really happened.
Okay.
And it didn't happen from the stage. I was talking to a guy and I just won't shut up about how my parents met because it's the most interesting thing about me. And I just said my parents met in a mental hospital, and he really went oh, wow, doctors. And I was like, is it that you don't want to know what I'm saying? Or what's that? Yeah, it was weird.
Someday a kid will be like, yeah, my parents met at the Capitol insurrection. And someone will be like, oh, they're cops.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
That's funny that he drew that conclusion. And then so
patients aren't people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was something really weird. I don't know what that was.
Right.
And you kind of briefly take that perspective of somebody who's gullible and naive, and so you introduce that perspective to the bit. I mean, that's a tool that I use too if I'm having trouble. I know if I know a premise is funny, but I'm not sure how to get the punchline across. Sometimes I'll take a step back and be like, how would somebody who's super naive look at this? Or how would somebody who's super into, dark shit, how would they look at this? And just kind of attack it from as many points of view. Do you ever find yourself doing that when you put together a bit, a heavier bit?
No, actually. And I think that's great that you do that. I think I might start doing that. I used to write dark bits when I was younger. I would think it was super important to just be as edgy as possible and fucking make the audience uncomfortable. And then now, so that's what I used to try to do. And now I'm okay, how can I actually deliver this so that it's soft and it's funny? I don't have to just stab them with trauma. I can soften it a bit. And I try to look at it in the perspective of someone who's out on a Saturday night, wants to have a couple drinks and have a laugh, basically.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, is like you said, more inexperienced comics will try to be oh, this point is so important.
Yeah.
So these people just want to have a good time on a weekend. You're not, they didn't sign up to see Carlin. They're.
Yes, exactly. You're not come on, you're not a philosopher. I know that's popular, but
for fuck's sake, make them laugh.
Yes, be funny.
So then you go from there to the chunk, the part of the bit where you're talking about, your parents see and hear things that aren't there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you tie that to you being a gullible 6-year-old, which is really funny because, and then you do the power of 3 joke. You introduce the 2 things that most 6-year-olds believe, Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, and then the third punch, which is the men on your porch there to kill your dad.
Yeah.
Got to take us through that. What was that like as a child?
It was nuts because you don't and I want to I want to expand that joke a little more too in the future, because I want to really grasp the idea. I really I did believe in Santa, but we were Jewish. I believed in Santa because why not? Because you could believe in anything in my house. I didn't know what was real and what wasn't. And my mom was super good, too good at tooth fairy stuff and stuff like that. And then my dad really did have paranoid schizophrenia, and with one morning, I remember he came in my room and he was get down on the ground. The men outside are going to come get me or whatever. And I looked outside and there was no one there. And so, but you don't know, you're a kid and your dad's get on the ground. You're okay, So it did actually come from a really dark time. But at the same time, my house was very I don't know, you could have an imagination, I guess.
How was that explained to you as a kid? Did your parents try to explain that, sometimes we're going to say things that might not be true? Or how did that?
No, nothing was explained. My parents I think their generation really shamed mental illness. And the fact that they ever got help for it was very shamed, and they really tried to sweep it. Here's the thing is like they tried to sweep it under the rug because they were ashamed of it. But what they have is so you can't hide it if you're off your meds. Like it's pretty cuckoo bananas. So no, I was never sat down and talked to about it. I just kind of had to piecemeal it together. Like the older I got, like try to figure it out.
Okay.
It's alarming. My parents are the same way about they don't know what anxiety is or anything. You know what I mean? It's like one of those things where you're like, I don't fucking know.
Yeah, like that's weak. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
It's brain science, actually.
Yeah.
And did you know you can actually, if you lead into it in the right way, you can actually be a better person.
Yeah. And they're like, no, it's
Yeah.
embarrassing. It's like, okay.
No, it's the demons.
Yeah.
Did that scare you? I mean, do you remember like being scared at all as a kid, or?
Not of that stuff, really, because that's all I knew.
Mm-hmm.
My dad had like anger issues, and that was scary. But like as far as like my mom thinking there's like a ghost in the hallway or whatever, I was just like, okay, sure. Like, I don't know.
So you'd go on one of those ghost hunter shows and be like, "Oh, you guys are just schizophrenic."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know them.
Right. Do you think that gave you kind of a leg up on other kids? Like you have to figure things out yourself? Because for a lot of us, we held our parents up in this high regard, and then you get to a certain point in life and you're just like, oh, my parents don't actually know shit, and they're just kind of feeling their way through life just like everyone else. Do you think, did you come to that realization at a younger age?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I came to that realization when my parents split up when I was like 6 years old. The same year I wanted to do stand-up. I do have a firm belief that you have to hit bottom of some kind to want to do stand-up.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I had that really young. I don't think it gave me a leg up. I was really weird in school. I got bullied a lot for being very weird. So I don't think it helped me as a kid. I think now as an adult, it's given me some perspective that's cool to have. But as a kid, no. I was just like, what?
Yeah, it's one of those slow burn things where it's like, this is awful. It's terrible. I have to go to soccer practice, but and everyone hates me. But it kind of builds up long term. Being able to look back.
Yeah, I was like the weird kid with weird stories, but now I'm the weird adult with weird stories, and it works. Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah, you come into your own.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say you were funny when you were a kid?
No. When I became a comedian, everyone was like, what? Like you? No, I was very quiet, very timid, very scared and shy and nervous. And I was funny. Once I was a teenager, I was really funny, but I was really funny with my friends. When it came, I was never the class clown. I wouldn't dare speak out in class. Like I was normally ditching class, but if I was in class, I was quiet.
Could you make yourself laugh, or could you find the funny in the things that were happening at the time?
Constantly.
Mm-hmm.
Because I needed to. It's like a survival thing. Like I think like it's so important to be able to laugh at things. I mean, even now, like if something upsets me, I'm like, I gotta grab Twitter, I still to this day, there was a podcast host who commented, he was like, you really like pour your heart out on Twitter. It's like reading a journal. And I was like, yeah, like I have to make jokes about stuff. Otherwise they're heavy,
Yeah, that's helpful. It's funny how many people I run into where it's like, oh, I never thought of laughing to make myself feel better.
Yeah. It's like, that's the thing, dude.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody knows about dopamine.
Yeah.
Come on. Okay, unlearning. That was kind of that was the word that really stuck out to me throughout your whole set. Like that's the one bit that stood out. Maybe just because I'm a geek and I love the idea of like conditioning and how people grow up if they live in a house where their parents are like super productive or super religious or super drunk. And and just kind of seeing how they adapt that to becoming an adult. Like that's always interesting to me. I like the character development. So unlearning, like when did you unlearn, like consciously, you know, did you go to therapy? Did you talk to people? Like what made you kind of step out from your conditioning as a kid?
Well, I've been to a lot of therapy. But I would say, actually, and I wrote a piece about this, but I haven't published it. So I'll talk about it. Okay. But I basically, I would go probably when I was like 16, 17, and I started talking to people, like, especially when I started going to like parties when I was in college, like, and I would start talking to groups of people and they would like be telling like stories, you know, like socializing. And then I would pop in with like, oh yeah, like this time my dad did this or whatever. And people would get like really uncomfortable. And I like didn't understand that I just said something like fucked up. And like, I just thought it was like something everyone experienced when they were a kid. And then it's slowly through like embarrassing social situations like that, I started to be like, oh, I wasn't raised normally. Like it started to just like kind of get like show on people's faces when I would like talk about stuff my parents did. And I'd be like, oh, I guess this is weird, you know?
Yeah. That's a great sketch premise. I mean, it's been done, but nobody could do it like you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it should be something. I know I like wrote a thing about it, but I should look at that. Yeah, totally.
There's so many different things. I mean, just the idea of like one person says this one thing about their childhood, like, oh, my parents took away my PlayStation when I was bad. And like, you know, and then I got grounded from going to soccer on the week of the championship. And you're
right. And I'm like, my dad was wasted at my high school graduation, made a scene. And everyone's like, what? And I'm like, no, it's funny. You don't get it.
I guess you had to be there. That's such a cop out. I guess you had to be there line, but
it can really save your ass though after a bad story. Yeah.
Have you I mean, so you were part of a sketch team. I saw you were it was featured on Adult Swim. Mm-hmm. Have you ever externalized your own experiences into a character?
No. I like this podcast. You're giving me good ideas. No. The sketch team was, I mean, we were on Adult Swim, so we were like had nothing to do with reality. I mean, right. Absolutely. And that was like fun too, in terms of like, it's related to this because like, it was my fun escape place where mm-hmm. like none of this is real. So it was like really fun to depart into absolute absurdist comedy too. That has nothing to do with any of this. So I think that's what I use that for.
Is there a line? Like, do you ever write something and you take it on stage? You're like, oh, this is great. You know, it's like the third beat of a joke. And then you take it on stage and everyone just blinks at you. Like, oh, maybe that was too much.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm getting better at knowing when it's too much now. But I'm trying to think. Sometimes, oh yeah, there's this one joke where this one will work, but it starts off where I have to explain that my brother, when he was 2, kept trying to touch the hot stove in our house, and my mom kept being like, don't touch the stove, but he kept trying to touch it, and my dad was like, we're just gonna let him touch it, and then he'll learn. And that he did. But like, my joke is just like, this isn't war. Like, you don't like, and it's like about how my parents were just shitty parents and like hands-off parenting. Like, they're just shitty parents. But like, when I say the burning his hand story, everyone's like, ugh. And I have to like go really fast with the rest of the jokes. Otherwise people are just like, I don't like that, you know? Yeah.
Which is kind of absurd to me because I feel like that's an example so many people use as far as not learning from your own mistakes. Like, if you touch the oven.
Well, like metaphorically, but I think
Yeah.
they picture a 2-year-old like touching a hot stove and they're like, and I'm like, no, I know. Like, I don't agree with it either. Like,
Right.
I'm on your side.
Do you ever?
The cat's
Pardon.
back. Different cat.
This is different cat. Yeah,
Different
there's just this house
cat.
is just crawling with cats.
I know. Like by the end of the podcast, you're just gonna be covered in cats.
I don't even know where they came from.
You can't laugh at that.
So the switching religions, that's an interesting concept because I grew up in a strictly Catholic house, right? We were Catholic from the day I was born until I decided to move out.
Woof.
And yeah, I mean, you know, it is what it is. There's a lot of humor there, but we're not talking about that today because I want to talk about your experience. So, born Jewish, were both of your parents Jewish?
Yes.
Okay. So born Jewish till 6, like you said in the joke, and then your mom decides not to be Jewish, and your reaction is, "Oh, it's just my identity, no big deal." Like, how was that explained to you as a kid, and how did you respond?
Well, I was stoked because I hated going to temple and all that. So my mom and my dad split when I was 6. And then my mom decided not only to be Wiccan, but to start giving us Christmas. And I was like, fuck yes. Like, I was so excited. I was like, this is the best. And then she just explained that she was a witch and that she made potions and she worked with crystals and stones and would read my tarot. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, I was into it. I was like, all right, this is fun, you know?
Got it. So was the identity line, was that just kind of like a hindsight thing?
The identity thing was a hindsight. That was definitely more an adult thought. And it was definitely for the joke. As a kid, I did not identify with any religion.
You're right. If you're 6 and you're like, this is my identity. Like,
yeah, I was like, this is who I am. Like, no, not at all. I thought it was super fun.
Okay. I mean, that's and then to balance it out with her deciding to go from being Wiccan to Catholic.
That's natural.
Yeah, right. What happened there?
That was very brief.
Okay. Yeah, good.
But we did go to church once, and I remember being really scared to be in a church because I went to temple as a kid, and my dad was so religious and told me that God would be mad if I like went to a church. But my mom was like, we got to go to church. So I was like, I don't know what to do. So I went with my mom to the church, and it was super scary. I'd never seen like a Jesus on a cross before. A Jesus. I'd never seen a Jesus on a cross. And that was like terrifying. Oh my God, he's like bleeding and it's like scary. And so I was like really scared. And then my mom quickly went to Greek Orthodox, which they also do church, but it's a little different.
It's more theatrical for sure.
Yeah. Yes.
I've never been to a Greek Orthodox. I've been to a Ukrainian Orthodox.
Whoa.
Which, I mean, there's bells and crowns and everyone's wearing a cape.
Yes, it's very similar. Yes, absolutely.
I feel like a lot of like D&D and like Lord of the Rings is based off of some of those costumes and props.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
It's also macabre, you know, the Catholic Church, like everything is centered around death and
Yes.
I mean, going from Wiccan to that, I don't know. I just feel like as a kid, I mean, you say you had a little bit of an identity crisis, like with your dad, with what your dad said about going to a Christian church versus going to temple.
Yeah.
But did it kind of shake you? What am I trying to ask? Did like switching different faiths, did that kind of reveal like the whole construct of religion? Did it like shake you out of that insider look, like almost like taking the blue pill, or was it the red pill? Oh.
You know what? I never saw The Matrix.
Yeah. But you understand the reference.
Yes.
The pill that takes you out of the Matrix.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it absolutely. If any of them, I believed in Wicca the most as a kid. I think because I wanted to, because that was the most fun. But I totally to this day, I believe that the human brain can only know so much, and there's way more out there than we know. I believe that there's all kinds of forces working that are so much bigger than us. And I do believe in that. But yeah, I'm not part of any organized religion. With all that going on, how could I be? Like, I was like, this is all, they're all telling me something different, but it's like the same, but like they're saying the other one's wrong, but none of them actually know. Like, I was totally like, this can't be the right answer.
Almost like if you didn't become a comic, it's like, people would be like, you had all these things.
Yeah. God help us if I didn't become a comic. I don't know what I would be.
So what made you include the religion part into the bit itself?
I wanted people to get an idea of my mom a little bit more. I also have another joke about her that's pretty funny. But it's a little more mean-spirited, and I kind of wanted one that was just like, it's not that mean-spirited, but it's like, it's a little tough. But I just wanted one where you were like, okay, so we have an idea of like her household with like there's schizophrenia, there's different religions and gods, there's like all this stuff. And I just like thought, I don't know, I wanted to paint more of a picture.
Okay. And that's through a lens that most people can understand. You know, everybody grew up with some sort of belief system.
Right.
You know, whether it's a spiritual based religion. I mean, you know, you can look at things like capitalism as a religion. We're not going to dive into that, but you know, everybody has these beliefs that they live by, and you connect with those. The Halloween to jail joke, where did that come out of? Was that, I mean, I feel like that's the centerpiece of the whole bit. Like,
it's
there are
why
some
I
bits,
say the bit.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's some bits that I do just because there's one good line in it.
Yep, that's this one is one of those. Yes, for sure. I built the bit around that line. I thought of it one day and was like, this has got to go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then because I had just thought of like, I think I was talking to someone and I was like, yeah, my mom went from Wiccan to Catholic. It's like going from Halloween to jail. And they laughed. And I was like, oh, okay. So I have to use this in something. Yeah.
Do you get a lot of your jokes in a conversational setting?
Yeah. No. Now I do. During the pandemic, I do. Because I'm not sitting down to write. I'm sitting down to write, but not stand up.
Mm-hmm.
So like it has to be like premises aren't flowing because I'm not performing as regularly. So now I get it through people being like, oh, you got to say that on stage. But generally in the real world, when life is regular, no, I generally it's through thinking. Like I'll be thinking about something and I'll be like, oh, that's something.
Okay. And then you go from that bit into your dad. So we learn about your mom and then you go into the bit about your dad going to jail. Mm-hmm. Kind of take us through that.
Like through the bit, or
through the bit, what started it, where you found the funny.
Sure. Well, the whole like my dad parenting me, like it actually what he really meant was what really happened is he never said you're grounded over the phone, but there was one time where I was like, I have a boyfriend, and I like, you know, dated a guy for a week because I didn't date in high school, but right. I had a crush on a guy or whatever. And I was like, I have a boyfriend. And my dad was like, oh, well, I'll kill him, you know, kind of a thing. Like, I better meet him. And I was like, you're like locked away. Like, you're not going to threaten anybody. Like, I was just like, what are you talking about? And then I was like, oh, I could simplify this, make it shorter if I just use the word grounded instead of say all of those words.
Did you start it that way and then whittle it down to the grounded bit?
Yeah, I started off with like the boyfriend thing, but then that's like hard to like, I don't know. It's like, I didn't want to explain it. And then it was just like, because then that gives a wrong image of me almost because like I did not date in high school. No one wanted to date me in high school. Like, and I want to make sure people know that because it makes it funnier. But yeah, I started with that. And then thought it was funny to like have that little side note of like, my parents are really mentally ill. You want to call in the healers, the police, which is horrible when no one laughs at that because they think I'm serious. And I'm like, no, joking.
Do you always have that saver line that, no, I'm kidding, guys?
No, I actually said that because that guy went like, oof.
Yeah, I heard that oof.
Yeah, and I was like, no, dude, no. I'm not up here like being like Blue Lives Matter. Like, yeah.
Got it. Yeah, I had a question about that. How do you feel when you do you ever get those kind of oof lines when you're going through any of that bit? And how do you respond?
Less and less. I think as I get better at performing dark material, I get that way less. But I used to get it a lot. And honestly, it used to just make me bomb. Like I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know what to do. I'd freeze up and be like, it's not, I'm kidding. Or I'd try to riff about it, but like I would trip up.
Mm-hmm.
And now I don't. Now if someone were to do that, I'd probably just riff about it and address them. And make sure everyone knows I'm good now. Everything's fine. And then
it's okay, guys. I'm good.
Yeah, like I'm here. I'm not, we're okay.
Yeah.
I'm not having a night terror. It's fine.
Now that's just one bit. Do you have any other bits that kind of recall your childhood? Because I mean, you headline Caroline, so that's that's a 45-minute set.
Yeah.
So obviously there's a lot more than just that like 3 minutes that we listened to.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a joke about this happened when I was a teenager, but I was out to dinner with my mom and we like left the restaurant and I had like a bag of leftover food in my hand and I went to give it to a homeless guy. And my mom really said this. She was like, Hannah, don't give food to homeless people. He'll try to sell it and buy drugs with the money. And then my joke is like, Mom, who's buying food from homeless people? But it was just such an insane thing to say, to think, even if that were true, who gives a fuck? Let them buy drugs. Like, I don't care. Like, what are you talking about? It was so weird. And then, I used to have a joke and I dropped it, but it was just like about my perspective as an adult is like, things don't really get me down because my little mantra is like, at least it's not my childhood. And it's just like, I didn't pay this, like, I didn't pay my bills on time. And it's like, oh, well, at least no one's doing cocaine while they're pregnant with me, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a classic connection.
Yeah.
If you could, take something that you wrote recently, if you could apply your mentality as a kid, like to something newer or something that you're going through now, have fun with it. Like what sort of, how would you look at it? Like, how would that perspective kind of color what you're going through now? What would like child Hannah tell you as you like write a joke about what's going on?
That's interesting. Well, I recently went through a bout of missing one of my exes a lot. And that's kind of over now because I looked at his Instagram and I was like, I don't care about this guy. But I think child Hannah would probably just be like, she'd probably make fun of him. She'd be like, this guy, he's in a metal band. Where they scream horrible. They scream about Satan into a microphone. And she'd be like, I don't like that. But yeah, actually I did write a joke about him, but I wrote a joke about how he was I need to change it because I wrote it when I started dating him and it was about like how he's so much better than me and like I don't know why he's dating me, and now I'm like, wait a second. So I need to like flip it around a little bit.
Amend that joke.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's funny. Okay, have you ever had anybody in listen to that bit and say, oh, you can't, like, that's not funny, or like, heckle or anything like that?
Not that bit, but my brother's disabled, and I have some bits about him, and I've been booed.
Huh.
Trying to say bits about him. But it's fun. Like, my brother loves the jokes about him, and they're all greenlit by him. But I definitely have people who like get upset. I mean, I say, that's less and less though too, because like as I get better at this, I get better at saying these jokes in a way that people won't get upset about. Like, I'm better at writing in a way that won't offend people or make them like too tight, Like, I think part of stand-up is like being able to graciously say the hard things and not like just hit people over the head with like, fuck you, I'm going to say retarded. It's like, well, let's like ease into nice language and stuff,
You've heard the analogy of comedy is the cheese that you wrap around the pill. And at first it's like Velveeta singles or like Kraft singles, and it does the trick. But the better you get, now it's in like a nice brie or like a smoked Gouda, like
Come on, Bear.
What?
Laughing.
Do you run your jokes about your parents by them first, or are you just like, buckle in, mom and dad, because you're at my show and nobody's safe? Like, how does that go?
It's buckle in.
Yeah.
I run them by my brother. Me and my brother are very close. My mom and I are pretty estranged, so definitely not. And then my dad, no. Like, and my parents aren't funny, so they like, actually my mom's kind of funny, but my dad's not funny. So like running a joke by him would just be a bummer. And honestly, my dad is, as long as I'm getting laughs, like my dad's just proud. Like, I've said dirty jokes. I've said jokes about him, and he's seen them all. And he's just happy that I'm like, if I do well, that I'm doing well. So that's really nice. He's very supportive.
Yeah. That's great. What was their reaction when you told them that you wanted to do comedy? I mean, first of all, you were probably pretty young.
Yeah.
But when you actually pursued it?
When I pursued comedy, I wasn't going to college. Both my parents begged me to go to college, but I dropped out of community to do it. And then it was kind of sweet. My dad was like, you got to go to college. You got to go to college. And then he saw me do stand-up, and he was like, actually, you're kind of good at it. So if this is what you want to pursue, you could pursue it. And that's fine. And then eventually I did go to college. I dropped out again, but I did go for a second. But yeah, like it was cool. My parents are pretty supportive of me.
Okay. So it's, I mean, were they always pretty supportive, like growing up, or was that something that they saw you actually enjoying what you're doing and actually being good at it, and they were like, oh, this is a thing we should get behind?
The latter, for sure. Like when I first told them I was doing it, they were like, what are you talking about? Go to college, get a job. Like, what are you doing? And then, they saw me do it and enjoy it. And they were like, oh, okay, like this could be something you pursue. Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my parents used to tell me not to play video games because I can never make money playing video games. And they'd be like, go outside and play baseball. Okay.
And you can make money playing with video games now.
Yeah. I mean, this was back in like 2002, Yeah,
for sure.
So you have your own experience with your parents and your childhood, and you've been able to make light of that. And that's, it's part of who you are. Like, we all have a unique story. We all have like our unique background. And so you take this topic and you look at it from a point of view that nobody else in the universe can. And that's really, really cool. We see a lot of other comics that have dealt with, their own problems with their parents. Have you ever worked with or spoken to a comic that has like a similar bit, or is a comic that you can think of that has a bit about their own upbringing that resonates with you, even though it wasn't yours, wasn't your like unique experience?
I hear comics like Eddie Pepitone will talk about his dad sometimes, and it's really funny. And he talks about his dad actually being very abusive, but it's really funny. And that kind of reminds me of it. But I don't hear a lot of comics delve into their childhood as much as I tend to lean on it. And I don't see that as often. Do you know Jeff Sheen?
I know the name.
Jeff Sheen is a New York comic, super funny. Shout out to Jeff. He's great. And he has this amazing bit he talks about as like a little boy, like being in love with his mom and like just having the Oedipal complex of like wanting to kill his dad, but loving his mother so much. And it sounds so sick, but the way he does it is so funny. It's it's one of my favorite bits. And that's like pretty twisted and it's very funny.
Yeah, that's definitely a unique take. Ooh, the Oedipal complex. Eventually, so you're going to be like in the late 40s of episodes. Like eventually I feel like we're going to run out of topics. So we're going to have to really like dig deep into like, okay, who has an Oedipus complex?
It's called a momplex.
Yeah.
Too soon.
Our upbringings definitely play into who we become as a person, for sure. 1,000,000%. But it's interesting to see two people with similar upbringings that have like totally different results. For example, people whose parents dote on them, they become dependent on their parents, or people whose parents dote on them, they become completely independent. Like I had a cousin who ended up, and here's a dark twist, and Steve knows what's coming. She had her mom killed.
Whoa.
So yeah, it was like one of those where her mom was so like smothering, but gave her everything, that the only out that she could see was, I'm going to pay somebody to have my mother murdered. And it's like, yeah. So, but equally, I know
my uncle is in a cult in Texas. So top that.
Yeah.
Whoa.
What was his childhood like?
a lot of concussions from college football.
That'll do it.
Not even worth it. It wasn't like, long story.
Okay. That's a different episode, concussions. Yeah. But we're all like unique, and we all have our own response to things. Like her mom was super smothery, and then I have other friends who had parents that were like that are doing really, really well for themselves. So it's very similar upbringing, but two vastly different results. Like, how do you? I mean, I'm not looking at you as like a psychology expert, but I feel like you have a good perspective on things like this. Like, where is the difference? Like, how do things like that work? Like, I don't know.
I think
I don't know what I'm trying to ask.
No, totally. I think it's like different defense mechanisms and therefore different responses to things. Like, I just think it depends on our brains and the way we react. Like, I have become a couple different people since my upbringing. Like, I at first was completely addicted to drugs and partying. First I retreated as a kid. I retreated into myself, was very shy and didn't talk to anybody. And then I was a complete partier, drugs, alcohol. And a lot of my friends had been like abused as kids too. We were all just partiers and blah, blah, blah. And then I had to get sober, and I got sober and went to therapy and like worked a bunch of stuff out. And now I'm like trying to be as productive and successful as I can as my coping mechanism. But I think I've been a few different people, but I think that it just depends on, like, if it's two different people, it depends on how your brain forms as a kid and what you do to protect yourself from whatever you need to protect yourself from. And then that ends up growing up with you as an adult. And then that's where the unlearning happens, right? Like, that's when it's up to you to either unlearn that, which is really hard, or just like keep those defense mechanisms alive.
Again, it becomes your identity. Like,
yeah.
I think it's interesting that you put it as, I've been multiple people. Like, I've been a few different people. Does framing it that way help? As in, like, this was a different person when I was doing drugs and partying. This was a different person. And then, like, I'm the culmination of these different forms of Hannah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I do like to think myself as a different person now at 30 than I was at 22, like, my God, like, I don't want to, that, I don't like that girl, but I understand where she's coming from. I get why she did what she did. But yeah, I like to separate myself for sure.
She had to do that to get to this.
Right. It was necessary, unfortunately. Yeah, for sure.
Do you have like old journals or writings from then?
Yeah, actually on my Instagram, I posted old jokes that I wrote when I was like 17 years old.
Okay.
It's like in one of my permanent stories or story highlights or whatever. But yeah, I do go through old journals, and they're mostly just like me not understanding I'm an alcoholic yet. It's mostly me just being like, how come I can't keep a bottle of wine here without drinking it all in a night? You know, it's like a lot of like, what's that? And it's like alcoholism. That's what it is.
Yeah.
I feel like that's helpful to kind of look back on and be like, oh, that's, that the growth between then and now, or.
Yeah, definitely. It's it's good to look at it that way. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. When you get on stage and you talk about riffing and like making it more fun, if you've been delivering like the same bit over and over and over, you're trying to work out the little kinks. Do you set goals for yourself? Do you like, say, oh, tonight I'm gonna focus on my delivery on this certain line, or do you just kind of like do it how it feels best in the moment and then go back and make notes for next time?
I do it how it feels best in the moment. I mean, I will go back and rewrite jokes. So I'll rewrite a joke and go up there and do it the new way. Mm-hmm. But if I haven't done that, then yeah, I'll just do it as it feels in the moment, and then possibly like riff and add stuff to it. And I record my sets, so if I add a punchline or something, I can go back and listen and write it down.
Yeah, that's the best. I search for that every time I get on stage. Just like, how can I add a tag to this? Can I, just the best feeling. Be in the moment. Yeah, mm-hmm. It was hard. I did that. I did that my first show back on stage. I'm doing a bit that generally works, and it's about like new technology and how I'm optimistic about, this new year. And it was perfect because it was like New Year's weekend. And then all of a sudden I started talking about 3D printed meat, and I'm like, I don't have a punchline for this. It's like, I haven't done comedy in 2 months. I trust myself to come to a punchline. And I didn't. And there was just like one person in the back, it was like a pity. Woo.
Oh no, those are the worst.
And I was like, thank you, I brought it back. I brought it back with a bit that I wasn't planning on doing. That usually always works, but
there you go.
It was like, I don't know. I don't remember how to do this.
Yeah, but it's still like, I would rather walk away having kind of done something not go well that was new and different than like I was just on autopilot.
Yeah. I don't regret it one bit. I never do. Yeah. That's the thing. Like, you can't look at things that have happened and be like, I regret that. Right. I mean, you could say, I wouldn't do that now, so then don't.
Right. Like, you can change it, but you can't go back and fix the past.
Right. Just write a joke about it.
Right. There you go.
Write a bit about it. Steve.
What?
How has what? How has your upbringing, would you say, like, had an impact on the way that you do comedy? Like,
my upbringing influencing it in terms of the subject matter being put into it, or do you mean it influencing my personality or writing style?
Both.
I do. This is the thing. What you were talking about earlier, Hannah, about how comics go through that phase of like maybe after almost 10 years, they'll start to change. Like when you talked about Louis C.K., the evil man, I am going through that right now, and I'm like trying to tap into like my childhood more, because I have a lot of really good stories and like, family dysfunction and things like that I can talk about. But it's like some of it's too deep, and some of it's like just not, like, I just don't know how to make that stuff funny, like it's tough. And you're like, I've just been doing jokey jokes for almost 9 years now, and it's just not like fun anymore. Mm-hmm. It's like, even good jokes that do really well, I hate them. I fucking hate them. I'm so sick of telling them. Some of them go all the way back to like the first 5 months. They're good. People like them, but I don't. And I have plenty of new material too, but I definitely have to change. I didn't answer your question at all.
But
I did in the beginning, but like, I wasn't funny when I was a kid either, by the way. Like you were saying also earlier, like I just really envied it. And I think about around 8th grade, I think all of my comedy comes from roasting people to get a laugh in class. That's where it started. It's like 8th grade. I used to get the best of the teacher because he was an asshole, and he wasn't like, he would let everything slide. So you could just keep pushing him, and then I would get writing assignments and stuff like that.
God, 8th graders are so scary.
Yeah, they are.
They're the worst
So
kind of
scary.
people.
Oh my God. So I will cross the street if there are 8th graders on my side of the street. I'm like, not today. Mm-mm.
I got a writing assignment for making fun of my teacher's loafers in a picture that we took of our trip to Washington, D.C. There was a picture of just him with his loafers. And I was like, look at these. I just roasted the shit out of him. Everybody thought it was funny. And then he gave me a writing assignment.
Oh, no.
No, he's a big tough guy. He's a big jockey, like track coach.
Okay.
And he's like the biggest dick in the world. His name is Mr. Boyle. And he that's why I picked on him, because he thought he was so funny, but he was dumb. I don't know. It was, I still like him, but it was just, we butt heads all the time. Anyways, that's kind of answering your question too.
What about like your childhood, like your parents? Would you say that they influenced your sense of humor or your like desire to get into comedy?
Or me?
Steve?
Oh, say that again.
We're unpacking Steve for a second.
Yeah, I'm like, no. What was your question again, though?
Would you say that like, did your parents have a sense of humor, or did they play any role in you eventually deciding to do comedy?
They were supportive. I mean, I was able to make them laugh in like my 20s. That's when I started to like make them laugh. So they like thought I was funny, but my dad was never funny and my mom was never funny. My mom's real quiet. My dad's kind of like very outspoken, but he doesn't have any sense of humor at all. So.
And Hannah, I mean, you say your mom's funny, your dad, nah?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm like trying to connect, like, do your parents have to be funny or not? And I know there's a study about like genetics and humor, but I'm not going to waste the time to like pull it up in my notes.
Well, my mom is like incredibly smart, like Mensa smart. And she is very, I think, and she's very funny. I think intelligence and humor are very intertwined.
Oh, yeah.
And my dad just like thinks accents are funny. So like, he's not funny.
Yeah. Hit him with a frying pan.
What was that a regionalism of?
What?
I was like, what is that a regionalism of? You were just doing a voice. That's a dialect.
I don't know. It's a few things. More of a twang to it. But no, you're right. Intelligence and humor are very closely intertwined. They're the same, there's two sides of the same coin. I mean, it's, if you could define humor, and then we'll close it out. I have one more question to ask you. If you could define like humor to you, because it's very subjective. I look at it as like a working out of two separate ideas in a way that connects them. But like, how do you look at your own sense of humor? How would you define that?
I feel like it's the opposite of magic in that you're showing people what's under the hood. Like it's taking something, it's like the big Wizard of Oz that's so scary, and then you're showing the little guy behind the curtain. Like it's like, no, it's not scary, it's funny.
Ooh, okay. Because I want to say like 9 out of 10 comics we have on here are like, no, it's a magic trick. But I love that perspective.
Yeah, I hear that too, but I actually find it to be the opposite. I feel like it's showing the truth, which is like funny.
Yeah, that's what I love about this thing is there's no one way to answer a question. There's no like one way to say, what's your secret or how do you write? It's like you take what you've learned from other people and you mold it to what you know and how you are. And that's
jokey jokes are not like anecdotal, where the jokey jokes are like the magic tricks, and then the anecdotal stuff is just really funny. Like it's all punchlines.
I feel like even the jokey joke, like if I'm like, oh, my cereal gets soggy. Isn't that crazy? Like even that's showing that the truth. Like it's still showing like, and I don't mean the truth as in blow your mind philosophy truth, but just like showing like the mechanics of how something works and breaking it down and sort of explaining the mechanics of how something works. That's how it works in my brain.
Yeah.
Right. There's sort of a formulaic component to it, but it's also like, how can we twist the formula just a little bit and come up with an answer that people aren't expecting? Yes, exactly. Especially when it comes to more like jokey jokes, like set up punch too. The Halloween to jail. Like that's an example of like what exaggeration or like metaphor. Yeah. Yeah. Well played. If you could give a comedian a piece of advice who is working out a joke or a bit about their own childhood experiences, whether they be traumatic or otherwise, what would you tell them? Like advice about doing it? Yeah. I would say don't write about something that you're still in, and don't force it. Like if you can't get jokes out of something and it just hurts and you're just still too in it to write a joke about it, and that's okay. It just needs time. And otherwise, like even when you are writing jokes, you don't have to shove it in people's faces and be super shocking for it to work. In fact, the opposite is, I find, like, you can be shocking. I'm not against it, but like you don't have to try to be shocking. That is advice that a lot of people need to hear for sure. And what about, if somebody is, who isn't a comedian, has that experience of their childhood and they're kind of trying to find ways to work through it, what would you tell them? Definitely journaling. I mean, therapy and journaling. Yeah. Journaling, I wake up every morning, like before I have coffee, just like wake up and start writing. And it really, again, no idea why, but it really helps. It's almost like a physical, like we all have different learning styles. Some people are more kinesthetic, some people are more visual. And I think to write something down, like a thought or a feeling that you have, almost makes it like real in a sense. At least that's where I come from. Yeah. Like seeing it in front of you rather than ruminating on it it's a totally different experience. Absolutely. Cool. Hannah, where can we find you on social media? And this is your chance to plug anything that you are working on now. Great. Yeah. Find me on Twitter and Instagram at Boone Comedy, Boone Comedy. And my podcast comes out every Monday on Spotify and wherever else you can hear podcasts. It's called Disordered. It's very fun. We talk about mental illness. And yeah, for upcoming shows or anything like that, because I have some Zoom shows coming up, you can just check out boonecomedy.com. There it is. Hannah, thank you so much for joining us, taking time out of your schedule. Yeah. And thanks for having me. Yeah. Absolutely. With that being said, next time you feel like that you've got a monster in you, and or if you're in a moment where there's two of you, remember that it takes two to awkward. Yeah. And remember that that you can laugh at that. And podcast. Special thanks to Golden Ox Studio. You can find Golden Ox Studio for all your podcasting needs at goldenoxstudio.com. Hit up Jeremy. He is fantastic to work with, a professional. He makes podcasting easy. And if you've been kicking the tires on starting your own podcast, definitely give Golden Ox Studio a look. If you'd like to weigh in on today's topic, follow us on Twitter at YouCan'tLaughPod, or like us on Facebook at You Can't Laugh at That, and tell us how you did laugh at today's topic or how you didn't. This is all about the conversation, is what I'm saying. All right. Bye.